I think they'll put me on sound as soon as it starts.
Please be seated. Good evening and welcome to this special ceremony to publicly present Honorary Aldermen Awards to 13 past councillors for eminent service to the London Borough of Wandsworth. A special welcome to our representative DL Major Richard Wilson, to all our recipients and their guests, and to all our current honorary aldermen who are here tonight. I tender apologies for past councillors Jane Cooper and Ian Hart, who are unavailably absent tonight. Apologies also from Mrs. Shona McGregor, accepting the posthumous award for Mr. Andrew Gibbons. It is possible that they are all joining us virtually, and if so, I again extend welcome to them. Our awardees have collectively served approximately 250 years, ranging individually between 10 years to a maximum of 32 years. This gathering is ceremonial, and so we will not be speaking politics today, but it is a great honour for public service, as the conferring of the title Honorary Alderman is the highest award that can be made to a former councillor in recognition of exceptional service to the council. You will now be shown a video presentation which provides information on how a councillor becomes an honorary alderman, information about the origin of the title and the legal status, as well as the role of honorary alderman. Just before the presentation, please note that the ceremony is being live streamed on YouTube and will be available for future viewing. Thank you.
Tonight, we celebrate 13 new honorary aldermen for Wandsworth. But what is an alderman? The title comes from the Old English word ealdorman, meaning elder man. The ealdorman was chief royal representative and presiding judge of the Anglo-Saxon shires. As the government of the City of London developed, the Court of Aldermen became its main governing body, and in 1835 the City of London was adopted as the model for all English corporations. The Local Government Act of 1972 did away with aldermen, but created the new role of honorary aldermen for people who have rendered eminent services to the council as past members. The role of honorary alderman is one of the highest honours that a local authority can give a person, and in the role they can take part in civic occasions as an acknowledgement of esteem, as well as attending community engagements on behalf of the mayor and civic ceremonies such as Remembrance Parade, special flag raising ceremonies, citizenship ceremonies and more. Tonight, we will be bestowing this honour on 12 worthy recipients for their dedicated service to this council, as well as a posthumous title. All their names will be placed on the honours board here in these chambers. We are proud to now announce our new honorary alderman, Mrs. Jane Cooper, Mr. James Daly, Mr. Peter Dawson, Mr. Paul Ellis, Mr. Adrian Fluke, Mr. Ian Hart, Mr. Piers McCausland, Mrs. Sarah McDermott, Mr. Mike Ryder, Mr. Guy Senior, Mrs. Rosemary Torrington, Mr. Terence Walsh, and receiving a posthumous title, Mr. Andrew Gibbons.
That was an informative presentation. I'm sure, like me, others have gathered new information on the title of Honorary Alderman. I now invite the Leader of the Council, Councillor Simon Hogg, to provide remarks in support of the awards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Delighted to be here, and thank you all for coming. My name is Simon Hogg. I'm the Leader of the Council, and you are all incredibly welcome this evening. I was going to say we have decades of public service in this room. Mr. Mayor, I now realise we have centuries of public service in this room. It's funny, I was chatting to Guy and Stuart and Paul on the bus on the way down here, and you realise that all of the old controversies just sort of melt away, and what remains is your public service to the people of Wandsworth. You know, whether it was insourcing versus outsourcing, Leave versus Remain, Blur versus Oasis, you know, it's just now what remains is that we all did our best, we all tried, we gave our civic service, and all of us were trying to make life better for the people of Wandsworth so they could lead safer and fulfilled lives. Because yes, local government, you know, sweeps the streets and empties the bins, but, you know, it also cares for the most vulnerable and builds the homes we need. So we are the part of the state that is closest to our communities and their hopes and their fears. So I want to thank you for your service and for the incredible part that you have all played in making Wandsworth such a fantastic place to live. I'll just say a few words about the Labour members on the list. There's only 2 of them, given the lean years we had during that period, and Councillor Sweet will continue after me. And I'll speak about them together, as I think there's some similarities. Andy Gibbons and James Daly shared a love of hard work, a love of music, a genuine loyalty, and a sort of piercing honesty that I found difficult at times. So the loyalty and honesty can be a very difficult partnership, but they became my 2 very best friends on the council. And I mean, there were plenty of differences between them. They weren't the same. You know, Andy was probably the most left-wing member of the group. James was probably the most moderate member of the group. Andy would violently rage against the Murdoch press. James would write for the Murdoch press. So there were differences between them. So Andy was a teacher and a father and a musician and a mountaineer, a passionate defender of schools and students, and, you know, the ability of everyone to fulfill their potential, almost never present on the education committee, an active trade unionist throughout his life. And as we know, sadly, Andy didn't make it to run the council, but, you know, he did play a central part in dreaming up that manifesto which guides us every day, and some, but not all of which was sketched out in the Gorringe pub in Tooting. So thank you, Andy, for your help. So much was said at his beautiful funeral that he was a great politician and a kind and dedicated person. And I just add that he was also a great mentor and encourager, not just of me and Andy, but of Rosanna and Sadiq and many others who've gone on from this place to serve elsewhere. And it was really touching, genuinely, how many Conservative councillors came up and paid their tributes, many of them here today, you know, in honour of Andy before his funeral, because he really did inspire that in people. And, you know, I look at his picture every day on my desk when I'm making decisions. And, you know, they say you only ever really die here on earth when the last person who loved you passes on, and Andy will be remembered in this place for decades to come. You can still imagine him there, actually, speaking with heart and passion and just trying to imagine a better tomorrow. And James was also a great speech giver, seriously underrated, didn't get to give enough speeches, but just absolute flow, total passion and commitment. It was wonderful to see. And it was no good heckling James or Andy. They were both absolutely immune to insult or flattery, just very confident people who knew who they were better than no one, and no one was better than them. They were great speakers, both here and in committee, but my memories of them are working in the back room. You know, James was my chief whip for many years, working with Andy on the manifestos. Great partnership with James, sort of, as I say, two former Fleet Street journalists who'd founded their own businesses and become councillors, trying to raise young families, trying to give up smoking, sort of working late into the evening. And I think James was impressed by how much of the nonsense of politics that I put up with. And I was always impressed with how little of the nonsense of politics he put up with, because he always knew that, you know, there were better things outside Monica and Issa and Rafa. And he's quite right, and it's lovely that he can be here this evening. And I don't remember a single argument or even a strong disagreement that I had with Andy or James throughout 12 years of service, but just a huge amount of dry jokes and wry observations. So thank you very much for your support and friendship throughout. And both of them saw finance as the centre of politics and brought, you know, real insights about finance to our group. And James now uses his financial acumen through his company, Fairer Finance, and helps many more people that way. And declaring an interest, I am an investor in his company. So is it still going okay, right? Is it okay? That's good. Got to that. Because James has a thriving life outside politics, I'm very grateful he's godfather to my daughter Emma. And while I still listen exclusively to music from 1993 and rarely leave tooting, James constantly discovers new bands and travels the world. So I've always admired that about him, and I wish him continued happiness after the council. And, you know, we're all so sorry that Andy didn't get that long retirement that he richly deserved after his service as a teacher, service on the council. And as I say, hugely grateful for your service and friendship. Unfortunately, as the Mayor said, Andy's family couldn't be here this evening, but his widow, Shona, did send a message. She said, we're grateful to the Mayor for rewarding Andy's long service. Working as a councillor was such an important part of his life, and I know he really valued the opportunity to serve the local community. As a family, we're proud of his commitment and all that he achieved. So thank you, James and Andy. Your hard work will live on every day in the council. We'll look at that panel each time we're in this fine chamber, and your names can watch out over us to make sure we're doing the right thing to build on your hard work and dedication. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the other fantastic public servants we have here. It's just an extraordinary depth and breadth of achievement. We got to read through all the things you've done in your career in the town hall. And I know Councillor Sweet, who is close to those Conservative achievements, will be able to say more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. I now invite Councillor Will Sweet, Opposition Leader and Leader of the Conservative Group, to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it's great to be here for this very special ceremony to honour former colleagues who have given so much in service to the Borough of Wandsworth. I've only been given 5 minutes to speak, and as there are so many Conservative nominees, it only amounts to 30 seconds for each alderman, which is not enough really to capture more than just a personal recollection of each of you. But in a way, I think that's fitting, because all of us here that are councillors or former councillors enter this chamber not to become famous or to have a name inscribed on a board, but to give something back to the communities where we live. And it's that kind of sense of duty and selflessness which I think unites all of the alderman nominees tonight. It's excellent that so many of you have brought your families here too. I think they deserve a bit of recognition for putting up with so many evenings away, and perhaps tonight will give a small insight into what you've been up to these last many decades. So to start with Jane Cooper, who I think I saw, yes, she's here joining us, I believe, from Canada. Jane is a Wandsworth celebrity, in my view. She's well known around the borough because Jane gets so stuck into the community, and she's got that huge focus on just making a difference for people's lives. Jane was mayor several times, but the time I particularly remember was during COVID, when Jane not only did an incredible duty to the borough during a time of crisis, but she also agreed to extend her term. We needed someone to steady the ship, and Jane absolutely did that during COVID. She's also someone that puts political differences aside. She extends a hand of friendship to the Labour group, and we saw that in her choice of Deputy Mayor most recently. I must say, from a personal perspective, to watch her as housing chairman when I first became a councillor was a masterclass, because what she did was members that thought they disagreed on something, whether it was Conservative members or Conservative and Labour members, after a few minutes of Jane just explaining things to them, they would come to an agreement, and it was that kind of force of personality which I think made her a great councillor. I also particularly remember once going to her house where a four-course meal was served to me by her husband Arnold. So thank you, Jane, for your service. Adrian, you served in 2 separate stints as a councillor, separated by nearly 2 decades. And I was astonished to hear that Adrian actually hosted a visit from the Deputy Prime Minister during his first term as a councillor. But that's not Dominic Raab, it's not Nick Clegg, it's not even John Prescott. We actually have to go back to Michael Heseltine, which tells you something about how long Adrian served Wandsworth for. During your first term, you were chairman of the Property Committee, which delivered some of the council's flagship housing policies. And I think those first 2 terms were only brought to an end by your becoming a Member of Parliament. So an abrupt but rather nice end to your first period of service. Ian Hart, who's joining us from Brazil today. Ian served for 28 years as a councillor across 3 different wards, and he was in the cabinet for 14 of those years. I understand that he was an excellent whip under Edward Lister's leadership, and I can imagine from our many group meetings that he was rather formidable in keeping discipline. I know that he believed very strongly in what he was doing across 3 different cabinet roles that he fulfilled for Wandsworth, and I've been told that he was actually picketed at his place of work at one point for what he was doing. So although he's dialing in from Brazil, I know that as Alderman he will continue to speak up strongly for the people of Tooting, as he always has, as well as enjoying a bit more time walking his dog Charlie on Tooting Beck Common. Sarah McDermott. So Sarah, I learnt actually some South London trivia in researching what I was going to say about you. So the question is, what is the only station between Victoria and East Croydon that doesn't have ticket barriers? Wandsworth Common. Now the answer is Wandsworth Common because people want to be able to walk, residents want to be able to walk across that bridge in order to get to the Common. And the reason there are no ticket barriers, it turns out, is because of our very own soon-to-be Alderman Sarah McDermott, who also was responsible for lighting Balham Bridge a little further down the line. Sarah was a fantastic cabinet member for Environment and Leisure, where she protected funding for libraries, and she helped get the council's children's services back on an even keel in her time as cabinet member for children's services. But my own personal memory of Sarah was her time as planning chairman, when she helped deliver so much of the Nine Elms development. But she was this incredibly even-handed chairman. She was respectful to all members of the committee and to the public. And she was a very welcoming councillor in what is sometimes quite a sort of strong-willed committee. So thank you, Sarah. Terry Walsh, you served for 20 years across 3 separate stints as a councillor. Terry is an expert on trains, as many of you who have spoken to him will know. And I know that you told me once that you served as a location scout for various train stations for films. And you brought that enthusiasm to the council, including working for many years on the passenger transport liaison group. You had a huge influence on improving train access across Wandsworth and holding transport providers to account. So residents that commute using trains, which I think probably includes most of us at some point, should be very thankful to your work. And I would also add that you have a very dry sense of humour, and one colleague said to me that it was a struggle sometimes to control the giggles when you whisper something during a committee. So we'll miss that. Rosemary Torrington. Like Terry, you gave many years of excellent service chairing the passenger transport liaison group. And I actually have never sat in on that meeting, but I've been told that you were quiet and persistent and determined to get answers from train operators and TfL. And I think, though, that you've just always been very decent and sensible, which is why it was so appropriate that you became the group chairman in your last year as a councillor, keeping us all together in a very fair and reasonable way. Mike Ryder, I remember as planning chairman that sometimes you used to dread certain members making very, very long speeches. And Mike, you always had the opposite approach. You zeroed in on exactly what the issue was that mattered to residents, and you just made the point, and it was incredible to see. And I wonder if that was a legacy of your time on Fleet Street as well. You have an eye for detail, and your ward colleagues have said this, that this was so valuable in helping residents to understand casework. And I personally have seen, even since you stepped down as a councillor, you've continued to do casework, and you're on at me to make sure things happen for residents that you're caring for and looking after. I remember spending many mornings delivering leaflets with you, or handing out leaflets at Putney Station. I also have a happy memory of attending one of the early events for Battersea Power Station with you and your wife. Guy Senior, 32 years of service. It's very hard to do that justice, but I'm going to mention just three things. The first thing is your time as Cabinet Member for Finance. When Guy helped with Ravi to bring in the SSA has been a huge success in saving the council money and enabling us to do more with the money that we have. And the fact that it continues today under completely different political parties, the Lib Dems and Labour, I think shows what a success that was. The second thing is your work as trustee of Battersea Arts Centre. And the third thing, and maybe the most important thing, is actually your work on the very successful and popular cross-party visits to France and Belgium to visit battle sites, particularly at Ypres, and to represent the borough in memorials at our sister village, where I understand there is a red phone box in Wandsworth's honour in the Place de Wandsworth. So congratulations on that. Paul Ellis. Paul was previously a Conservative Party agent, and I found that when we worked together, you always brought that insight into why people were voting into your council service. Paul was a formidable housing cabinet member, and I remember also you took me for a Vietnamese meal when I first joined your committee, and it was that very welcoming approach that I think made Paul a great cabinet member. You brought common sense to our discussions, and you also laid the groundwork for the Winstanley regeneration, which is going to transform Wandsworth residents' lives. I think you're also one of the most well-travelled people in this room. I understand you actually have once visited North Korea. So that's a story I look forward to hearing later. Peter Dawson. Peter, you served, I think, for 16 years. You were my own councillor when I was a resident before I became a councillor, and you supported me in my effort to become a councillor. And in fact, asking around, I understand you've done that for quite a lot of members, so mentoring new councillors and generally looking after us. But the thing that we all remember the most is your work to introduce the Bolingbroke Academy. So when the Bolingbroke Hospital closed, you worked so hard with council officers to make sure that the site was retained as an educational use rather than becoming a block of flats. Bolingbroke Academy is now 10 years old, so a huge legacy of your time on the council. And you've said to me that you had a personal highlight, which was actually being the deputy mayor to John Fairbrother. So I never met him, but it sounds like that was a very special moment for you and for Linda. And Piers McCausland, 24 years as a councillor. Piers first became a councillor for St John's Ward and then Fairfield Ward. And I know how proud he was of getting Old York Road turned into a conservation area and of the pedestrianisation plans which we hope to see delivered on Old York Road. Piers was mayor twice, and I remember nominating him at his most recent time as mayor. And as I was preparing what I was going to say, I received an email from Piers with a biography of a medieval ancestor of his called Sir John Hawkwood of 1323 to 1394, and a very daunting request from peers, which was that I needed to mention this medieval ancestor in my speech about him. And I have to say, in the end, it wasn't much of a challenge because, like your ancestor, Piers was just such a hard-working campaigner. And on a personal level, as his ward colleague, it's just astonishing how many times you knock on a door, the person opens the door, even to me, who have been a councillor for 8 years, and they say, "Where's Piers?" So, you know, that kind of connection to people on the doorstep is what's made you a local legend. So many of us in the room will have our own reflections on the Alderman, and I know I haven't really done it justice, but I do think the thing that unites all of the Conservative Aldermen in the room is the kindness that you show to new councillors, or have shown to new councillors. In almost every case, I have a personal memory of each of you showing some kind of support to me or to a colleague in a moment of nervousness or of difficulty. I am sure that you'll continue to do that work as Alderman of the borough, although I'm also sure that you'll enjoy having a few more evenings to yourself. So thank you for all of you for all of your service.
Thank you, Councillor Sweets. The red light didn't go on, so you've definitely done it within 5 minutes, but thank you very much. I will now present each of the recipients with their certificates, and we'll do so from the front of the dais and invite Mr. Brian Riley to announce each recipient and Mrs. Patricia Batista to assist me with the certificates.
I think so, yeah. The Mayor will now present Mr. James Guy David Daly with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr. Peter Martin Dawson with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr. John Paul Ellis with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr. Adrian Fluck with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr. Piers McCausland with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mrs. Sarah McDermott with her certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr. Mike Ryder with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr Guy Senior with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mrs Rosemary Torrington with her certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. The Mayor will now present Mr Terence Walsh with his certificate, duly affixed with the common seal of the Council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
It is now my privilege to invite the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Samila Varatharaj, to unveil the Honours Board, which has been duly engraved with the names of our newest Honorary Aldermen and women.
In recognition of the eminent service of our most recent Honorary Aldermen and women, I now unveil this Honours Board.
Thank you, Councillor Varatharaj. It has been my pleasure to preside over the evening's proceedings. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. May I now invite you to take your way to the Marble Hall for refreshments, and I kindly ask all awardees to join me in front of the dais for a group photograph.